Welcome to the DAO Factor. I'm your host, Lisa Yu. I'm a crypto and tech investor, entrepreneur, and speaker. I got into crypto in 2017 when I took rental payments in Ethereum, and since then have invested and advised dozens of companies in tech and in Web3. For those of you who are new to DAOs, a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization that's taking the world by storm. Today, I'm super excited to introduce to you our guest, Flex Chapman, founder of Krause House, a community of hoop fanatics just crazy enough to buy an NBA team. Their mission is to collectively own and operate an NBA franchise as a DAO. First off, Flex, what are you most passionate about and what motivates you to wake up every day?
Yeah, I'm going to go with probably the easiest and most intuitive one. Is it's kind of a dream come true that my full-time job is trying to figure out how to collectively organize and coordinate a bunch of basketball fans from all over the world to pull not only financial capital, but human capital together, and actually get on the cap table of an NBA team. I couldn't have guessed in my wildest dreams that would ever be my full-time job, but here we are. That's definitely what the get out of bed moment every day is, for sure. That mission and trying to accomplish that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what inspired you to start Krause House? Has been an idea that's been brewing, or because of current technology and innovation that you decided now is the time?
Yeah, good question. So it is kind of an unorthodox story. So the founder and the co-founder and myself, who goes by Commodore, we're longtime basketball fans and friends, actually in the same third grade class together. So have known each other for quite some time. And our dream was always to eventually own an NBA team. And so I think growing up playing, right, I think your first dream is to eventually play in the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everyone kind of gets the first dose of reality, probably late middle school, early high school, that the chances are that you will not be playing in the NBA. And so kind of the next exciting thing is, oh, well, cool. What if we could own a team? And then you get that second dose of reality where, statistically speaking, those are equally as improbable. In fact,
Right.
I think
You
it's
have to be a
probably
billionaire and know people and have access.
exactly. So actually, I think the chance, right? I think there's only 4,000 or so players to ever play in the NBA as
Not a
total
lot of
billionaires.
people.
No, not at all, ever, right? And so
Yeah.
it is a very small kind of sub cohort of the population that actually gets it, that actually has that opportunity.
Yeah. It's
And
like
so
elite athlete status.
exactly. And so we were sitting here, and then kind of backing up a little bit. I'm a long time software engineer, so I was introduced into crypto very much from the technical side of things, right? And so first hearing about Bitcoin probably in 2012 or 2013, and then once I started reading about Ethereum and Solidity, and I deployed my first really lightweight smart contract back in 2017. So I was always interested, but I always sat on the sidelines, right? I saw DeFi summer kind of roll around. I was like, that's really interesting, and I want to get involved. And we saw the NFT run up in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time just like outside looking in, waiting for this opportunity. And so when I first found out about DAO, sorry, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is the kind of the human-centric, community-led way to bring all these crypto primitives that we've grown to love, like DeFi and NFTs and tokens and governance, and kind of wrap them all together with community. And I was like, this is really fascinating. So ironically, this is where it's kind of weird, is as longtime product builders, our first instinct was to create a DAO and contribute to a few DAOs to kind of get this holistic vantage point of all the problem space, because I'll be the first to tell you, DAOs have a lot of issues. Like we see the opportunity, but there's certainly some things that need to be solved. So like, hey, let's get some hands-on experience of what it's like to build and also join some of these communities. And then we were actually thinking about building some sort of tooling or some product or service to address those problems. And so very ironically, right, we were like, hey, what's the craziest thing that we can go do to actually solve this? And we thought, what better way than to kind of give the full experience, the true nature of DAOs, which we believe is kind of difficult by one, achievable by many. And so we said, what if that is to buy an NBA team? And so we launched, and again, no marketing experience, first time community builders. It just kind of caught traction. And so I
Yeah.
remember calling Commodore like 3 weeks into it. And I was like, hey, DAO tooling is a great space. Don't get me wrong, but there's enough smart, talented people that actually want to try to see this happening. So this is our product now. Like this is what we're doing. And so yeah, it's been crazy. And almost to the day, we've been at it for about a year.
Wow,
Mhm.
incredible. Well, congrats for just putting this together and seeing the vision. And I can tell you're very passionate about it.
Mhm.
And, when we first met, talked about how DAOs is this intersection of community and technology, and it brings the human element into this new tech. And, now that we have the structures for it, it seems like there's not a better time than now, to start this community ownership, whether it's an NBA team or something else. And I'm curious, like, how did you know that this was going to work? Like, what gaps did you see in NBA team ownership today? And how are you looking to solve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people intuitively think that the two kind of are at odds. You have like this mega billionaire owner, face of the franchise, and then the fans. And so it's a little bit sensitive to talk about fan-based ownership or community ownership, like the two are at odds. But really what it is I think really we want to kind of leverage all the potential energy that's just sitting in the fan base. I think when you think of fans, you typically think of everyone just filling a stadium, roughly wearing the same colored jerseys, right? And cheering for the same team. But
Right.
these are entrepreneurs, these are accountants, these are lawyers, these are people who have started their own development companies or marketing agencies, right? Where and they're already so irrationally passionate about the team that they support, that I think with this concept of trustless and kind of the immutability of blockchain technology and what we can do, you can actually start to harness some of that talent and that labor pool within the fan base to actually add a lot of value to the franchise, right? And so that
Yeah.
ownership and agency thing is actually really compelling, right? Where if I'm even if I work 50, 60 hours a week, when the weekend rolls around, knowing that I can either own or sorry, I can build equity in my favorite team that I support, like that's something I'm totally willing to do. And so we think about a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, right? They have one of the most storied franchises in all of sports. It's not just NBA, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so they have an analytics
Super
team of one
fan.
person. Yeah, they have an analytics team of one person. And so in Krause House, even today, right, we have 5 or 6 data scientists, one PhD candidate, another founder that's currently going through an exit, right? So really talented folks that would gladly 5 or 6x that analytics output and run regression models and put together reports in their
Mm.
free time and then supplement and augment what these team business units or operational groups are already doing. And so that's something that we really don't think of as hey, there's no room for the majority owner. In fact, the opposite. We want to kind of come in and really help out, but we think that there's a shared upside component that will enable that through ownership.
Yeah, no, that's great. It sounds like you really feel like not only are the fans just going to be part of the DAO, they get to be an active participant, they get to contribute, they get to, help build the franchise. And that decentralized ownership can bring more value to the team rather than having a single owner or a small board of owners, because, the fans are going to want to know what the viewers want, because they are the ones showing up to the games, every week. And sometimes even as an owner of an NBA, you might not have the time, to show up to every game. So, who's going to be the people who are present? Who's going to be the people who are, giving that two-way feedback? And I think this is really great. And I'm glad that you're trying to be very inclusive and bringing more people into having access to ownership, because that's what Web3 is all about. It's having access, freedom and ownership, and really being able to decentralize from having a more like authoritative figure, centralized ownership of data and of businesses, and just being able to distribute that across, multiple owners. And so being power to the people. I'm curious, what is your background as an athlete? Obviously you mentioned, playing basketball growing up. I want to hear more about, your involvement in different teams and how that has shaped you as an entrepreneur.
I'll start by saying a disclaimer. I don't necessarily have an illustrious basketball career compared to some of the people that I've got a chance to speak to, but grew up playing my whole life. Played a lot of different sports in high school, all three seasons, if you will, and then during the high school years, so football, basketball, and baseball. And then really what I think caused me to be so passionate about this thing is talking to some of these athletes that have played overseas or made it to the NBA or even kind of moved on to eventually getting front office positions or anchors on a media, like a large media network. I think this concept of ownership is kind of really like appealing to them. And so I think just like regardless of whether you play just kind of for fun, just casually, or you've had that experience to make it to the top, what we think is the top professional league in the entire world, which is the NBA. Yeah, there's a really compelling thing. I think what we've been able to do is tap into those heartstrings of everyone, regardless, who just love the game, including myself, right? Who played high school and a very brief stint on the college level. And there's people that didn't even play for the high school team, but still play 2 or 3 times a week. It's a really powerful game. It kind of adopts and drives this concept of fanhood. And we talk about this in our hype paper, which is our kind of like our first piece that we
published. Your
published.
hype paper versus the white paper.
Yeah. And we also have a flight paper that's a little bit more technical, where we actually outline kind of some of the roadmap and how we think about structuring this. But that was kind of our hello world type post, if you will. And so I think to be a fan, right, and to be a participant in something like that is really to kind of like, it's the truest form of love and community, in my opinion, right? It's to feel that you're a part of something, both that participation element and that fandom element, like the active participation and kind of the passive one, where you're just like watching your favorite team on TV. But that together immediately makes you part of a community, and the success of the team that you pull for, you are emotionally connected to that, despite not really having anything to do with it. Like I said, it's almost a bit irrational, right? Where when my team loses, I'm bummed, and when they win, I'm excited. Like there's no reason for that. We can't quite explain that. It's almost like a phenomenon. And so I think what we've been able to do is like, hey, this is kind of the chance for, like, regardless of where you are on your athletic journey or where you ended, I think this is the place for you. We actually, we're the self-proclaimed internet's home team. Like if you like sports and you like crypto and you think there's actually a chance to go make this happen, we have a spot for you.
What are some of the core values and tenets of Krause House?
I'd say the first one, and this is the one that we constantly find ourselves reminding people or anyone who's interested, any prospective community members, is the one that we kind of say out loud and proud, is this is a very long-term initiative, right? And for a couple different reasons. We have some shorter term goals. But if you think about how crazy it is for a bunch of NBA fans all over the world to possibly have an ownership stake in a league like the NBA, is an incredible thing, and it's never been done before, right? And so I think that we're going to make mistakes. I think we have to fight against some mainstream cynicism of crypto in general. So there's an educational component to it. There's a value add component that the few NBA teams we've actually had an opportunity to speak with, we said, like, hey, put us in a position where it's kind of a low risk, high impact scenario, and like, let us prove ourselves, right? And so, that could take months, that could take years. And so I think that the people that join, particularly speaking to the ones that contribute, realize this isn't something that you're in and out for 6 months, right? This is something that's going to take a really, really long time to achieve our long-term vision. This is a whole another a rabbit hole, but we don't think it just ends with basketball. Like, we think that there's something we can do with kind of in the sports ecosystem more broadly. So to accomplish that, like, the 20, 30 year mission, it's going to take some rule changes. It's going to take us over exceeding expectations. And so anyone who's a part of that mission. Not to compare ourselves to something like a SpaceX. We're not quite rocket scientists, but like, you know, when Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, no one assumes he's going to get that done in 6 months. And so I think the people that join, right, they're not like, oh, hey, I want to freelance for a couple months and help you achieve your goal. It's like some of those people are planning on being there for decades. And I think we're more akin to that than something that's a little bit shorter format.
Yeah, I mean, your goal is long-term ownership and to expand, globally, and to possibly own other types of sports teams. I mean, if I think of the international market, soccer, soccer is one of these is the most popular sport in the entire world. And there definitely are fan bases in every country for that. But I identify with you. I'm definitely, basketball is my first love, first fan. I really loved the Houston Rockets growing up, and I'm from Houston. And where are you from, by the way? Did you have a
So
team, any players that you like looked up to or really, cheered for growing up?
Yeah, great question. So many. I'll go through the different eras. Like I said, there's something about basketball since I was little. So I remember early days. You have to say the obvious ones like MJ. Like I remember I remember my dad telling me like I'm just a kid, right? And he's like, we're watching a game. I don't know. I'm easily single digits, right? I'm practically a baby. He was like, this is the best player to ever play basketball. And I remember being like, whoa, that's crazy. And so I remember my first couple Jordan games, watching them on TV at least. Guys like Charles Barkley, it was great to watch growing up. I was a huge Larry Johnson fan. It's a kind of one that's under the radar. He played for the Hornets for a while, and then later for the Knicks. So that was kind of like that 90s era, which we actually at Krause House, we draw a lot of our inspiration from. The 2000s, actually, I think a mutual connection of ours. Loved watching Baron Davis play. I thought he was amazing. Yeah, I think.
Into Krause House.
Yeah, exactly. I got a chance to play against Kevin Durant in high school, so that was no mystery there. He absolutely.
You got to play with him, against him.
Against.
That's incredible.
So yeah, no, as many of you might be able to guess, he absolutely torched us. I had a feeling, right, that he would end up roughly where he is today after watching him play. So yeah, Kevin Durant. You might lose some viewers after this. LeBron James. I think he's our GOAT. I know roughly the debate is out. I think I might be in the slight minority there. I think a lot of people still have Michael, but LeBron James has always kind of amazed me in how he can play. And then a lot of the newer guys, love watching John Moran. I think he's one of the most explosive, exciting young players. I could go on and on. I think there's been so many talented, marketable players. I remember Allen Iverson too, going back to the 2000s. I think he was such a fan favorite because he looked relatable. Oh, yeah. Like he looked tiny out there, despite he's probably like 6'1", right? But he looked so small compared to everybody else. I think he was a kid favorite, right? I think everyone kind of saw themselves when they were watching
like
AI.
Underdog, right? We all tend to want to root for the underdog, the person who's unexpected,
Exactly. I had a brief run into personally with Kobe at a gym when I was living in New York, and I wasn't sure how he would be, like just not knowing. And honestly, like couldn't say enough nice things about that guy. He stayed and talked to everyone that came up with him for at least 5 minutes, at least, right? Was laughing, joking around, like incredible guy, just an incredible dude. So yeah, I mean, there's been so many, and that's why I think working with the NBA, I think would be a dream come true for a couple different reasons. One, I think they've just had amazing athletes. I think they've done a really good job at promoting their players and really keeping the entire league in a good lens. And they have a reputation to uphold, and so that's one of our core missions too, is to build legitimacy for the NBA, right? We want to make sure that however long it takes, that we can prove ourselves to add a lot of value and maintain that reputation. We think that DAOs have some unique primitives that could help not only add a lot of value to franchises, but the leagues themselves. But we want to kind of prove that stuff and show that we can do it because we just really value the NBA as a whole.
Wow. I love that you want to collaborate, with the NBA team and to really bridge the gap, right, between fans, players, the management, right?
Mhm.
They don't need to be siloed. I think in the new world, with this whole DAO structure, you're really looking to create bridges. So that's really amazing. So with the rise of DAOs, so now there are about 5,000 DAOs and then a million DAO members, and we're still in the very early stages. How are you looking to make DAOs more of a common occurrence?
It's interesting. I thought a lot about this, and I think despite its problems, I'll be the first one to tell you there's issues. I meet with founders all the time that was like, hey, huge fan of Krause House. I'm thinking about starting a DAO, and they kind of go into their pitch, and I'm like, you sure you don't want to start just with an LLC, right? It'd be a lot easier, right? Like, don't force a DAO if you don't need to. I don't think we could do what we were doing as a traditional corporation. So it's like, it's kind of awesome that we kind of fell into this general
You need a
space.
lot of capital, and you want to crowdsource that.
Yeah. And also like we need human capital too. And so I think this is
Right.
that's actually a good segue, because I think what I tell people all the time is we neglect to see how broken our what I'll call contributor or workforce space looks like in general. Like anyone who's gone through an interview process, right? Like you go to apply. If you're lucky to have a connection, you might condense that process a little bit, but not much. So if you're applying for a job, right, like a couple weeks to get back to you, 4 weeks interview process, you get ghosted more often than not. And then when you finally get in the door, right, you find out your boss isn't as cool as you thought he or she was at the during the interview. You never really got a chance to connect with your coworkers before. You get put in a project that you weren't really promised, and then you
Mm,
have to stay there for a couple of years to avoid looking like a job hopper, because that reflects poorly on you. I mean, that whole system start to finish is very broken in my opinion, right? Like
yeah.
I've had people who say the workplace is toxic, my coworkers are weird and difficult to work with, but I have to stay because if I go to another job, then I have to show that I've put in time and I have tenure. DAOs
Sure.
fix almost all of that out of the box, like despite its problems, right? I know so many people that have started working for 3 or 4 different DAOs across a variety of skill sets. They can kind of see what they're working on. They can contribute on a liquid basis whenever they want. They can either earn something like USDC or other stablecoin, or earn equity, which is a huge component of DAOs too, right? It's like now
Mhm.
it's no longer a financial barrier to own something. You can earn through contributing, right? Which immediately is a huge value add to the individual. And then you can kind of see where you fit in best, who you like working with, and then double down on the ones you like, or keep working for 3 or 4. There's plenty of people that do that. And so how I would equate that is like imagine if the interview process or the full-time contributor process was, I can work a couple of days at Google, I can work a couple of days at Stripe, I can work another few at Airbnb, I can see what team I'm on, I can see how I like my group, and then I can actually get paid in a mix of USD and equity in that company or shares. I mean,
Or
that
crypto.
sounds like or crypto, like that sounds like the most ideal to me. And so
Yep.
I think what I tell people all the time is don't necessarily worry about if you have a hard skill or even a soft skill to come. You can jump in a variety of ways. I've seen people that get started by taking notes on calls, or hosting Twitter spaces, or just something that's very kind of low lift, and then they kind of see what they like and what they don't like. And I think that is an advantage. Like people often talk about, oh, there's a commitment problem with DAOs. Like, yeah, that kind of comes with the territory, but what you get in the long term, right, is people that are really, really incentivized to be there. They're there because they want to be, and not because it's a job.
Yeah.
I
Because
think those things.
they own a piece of it. There's a sense of ownership and
Exactly.
responsibility because you've committed to something
And
long
to
term.
be honest, that's how it works today, right? Despite the problems and like all these things that I talk about is, how do you determine reputation? How do you do? There's people that are way smarter than I'm working on that stuff, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. Collaborating with some of the builders in the space on how we build that. How can Krause House help speed that roadmap? So the definition of an optimist is not to think that there's no problems. It's to think that all the problems that are there in a space can be solved. And that's
Mhm.
the quintessential viewpoint that I have with DAOs, is that
Love that.
there's issues. There's totally issues. But like you said, we're in the early innings, right? There's so much time left. We're super early. And I think that luckily I have a good vantage point where I see the progress that's being made on all those respective problems. And it gets me really excited about the future of worldwide global collaboration on the internet. I think we're looking at the future work. I don't think the world needs to be decentralized. I don't think that every startup needs to turn to a DAO, but can really big, impactful missions be solved by these value aligned communities coming together, regardless of time zone. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's just a new way to organize. And, for DAOs, you can now earn, issue equity, raise funds and tokens, make decisions, vote, govern and operate on a global scale. So that just all sounds really incredible. And I think you nailed it, when you talked about, it's not like trying to force, a square peg in a hole. It's really, some things are better off as LLCs, some things require a DAO for more large scale impact. And so I love that you are kind of having that mindset of, how can this be an impactful organization? So in your mind, I guess what would be the benefits of running an MBA team as a DAO, and what kind of fresh ideas are you looking to bring, into the sports world?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I've obviously thought about this a ton, so it's hard to even know where to begin. I think that right now, and this is actually going on today, right? So we have a group called DSO. It stands for Decentralized Sports Operations, and basically they're kind of an R&D skunkworks group that is analyzing every possible business unit of an NBA franchise, anything from player development, team development, scouting, analytics, stadium operations, media, right? All these things. And they're basically looking for opportunities where a decentralized and community-centric design could actually add a lot of value to those positions. And so we'll be the first to tell you that there's some things that work on the league level and the team level that just work perfectly today, right? They work exactly how they're supposed to work. And so that doesn't mean that decentralization solves everything, but are there things that could kind of help, right? And we've talked to teams about, what does a distributed network of scouts look like, right? Like depending on some teams, they have a small number of scouts. Someone like the Warriors have a bit more. They have one of the larger front offices in the league, which is probably not a surprise, but instead of these scouts that can only be one place at one time, right, to check out a few prospects, what if you could send people from all over the world to, regardless of skill, but like record games or take notes of body language or how they interact with the coach, right? Like, what does a distributed scouting network look like? Things like analytics, right? Like pulling people that are in Southeast Asia or Central Europe that are high leverage PhD students or college students to help with training models. We're working with a team right now that does player recognition and builds computer vision models based on movement, right? And like they're just members of Krause House, right? And so you could either hire those people to join the front office, you could pay them as a service, or in a roundabout way, if you're an NBA team, you could have us pay you by being an owner, right? And so it's really compelling kind of short-term case that we're really doing. And so there's all these things we're thinking about. Hey, what does a token holder press conference look like, right? Like, and we don't know if these are good ideas or bad, but like, what if certain number of token holders allowed to ask the players direct questions after games, and not just be completely reliant on journalists or media, right? And so right now we're very much in that experimental phase of like, what can we do to add value? What can you do when you have 10,000 people all over the world with a variety of hard skills and soft skills that are ready to get involved? And again, it's not a takeover thing. It's a staff augmentation thing. And so really there's so many things that I think we could do. I think our minds immediately go to like general management, like, how do we find out who to trade or who to sign? And after digging into that a little bit, a lot of these GMs, they make personal deep connections with players and players' families and agents. That might be something that we are not able to tap into for a while, if ever, right? And so right now we're just kind of learning as much as we can about how to run a team, looking for opportunities, looking for ways that, like I said, we can leverage the talented community to help out. But I don't think there's anything off limits, but also we're not going to be naive and say, everything is going to be fully decentralized and completely global. I think we're looking for ways to improve current process.
Well, it sounds like you're building community. I mean, you are building a community of fans that are gathered around a common set of interests, obviously, in this case, for the love of the game. And so this is the question I had for you. What do you think is the heart of building community? Like beyond like the tools and the optics and like, how DAOs are run. What do you think is the kind of the heart behind it, like the human element?
Just to give a little bit of backstory, right? Like I kind of said at the top of the interview, was that we were very much product people, and so building community and marketing and things like that, which is how we started, was kind of intimidating for us. It's just skills that we didn't have really, and so with that was kind of interesting thing is we didn't know what we were doing, which was a good and bad thing, right? It's a little bit of a double-edged sword because we made mistakes that every marketing person in the world knows not to do, right? But we didn't know any better. But we also were forced to look at things through first principles. We could only experiment because we just didn't know any better. And so a lot of stuff came out of that I think that I would consider us, right, as thought leaders in some particular space. And one of those is, especially if you're starting out, doing things that don't scale. Like I remember someone who's probably a longtime community builder would be upset by our early growth, right? But I remember when we got our first 5 people in Discord, like I was ecstatic. Like that meant the world to me. So I was calling them and we're having meetings and getting to know them. And then once we started to hit that 100-ish area, I remember there was an intro channel and people would come in, and anyone with an interesting background or that I thought was really cool or had some story, I would get them on the phone and I would talk like, hey, what do you like? Why Krause House? What do you want to do? What are your skills? And the answers I got were like mind blowing, because in my head, everyone wants to come because they want to own an NBA team. But I remember one conversation with like, hey, I was an anthropology major and I studied the rise and fall of ancient civilizations. And like, I literally thought I'd go the rest of my life without deploying any of this knowledge, but DAOs is my opportunity to perhaps right the ship and get it right. Right. And so like, they're not even a sports fan. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, so it sounds so trivial, but like these people that are joining community, they're not just usernames, like talk to them. And obviously you don't have time to do that all the time, but I would say in the first couple of months, I probably did 40 or 50 of those. Right. And so as many sometimes as 3 or 4 a day. And so that really, really helped for the scaling to the position that we are in now, because I learned so many things about what people want out of this that it kind of helped, at least with that early roadmap stage. So again, it sounds basic, but I'm telling you, it's not, which is like talk to people within your community. All right. And like, you're going to find out so many nuggets of information that will last to those difficult points of scale and will help you push through those. I think number 2 is, and I was guilty of this too, coming from the startup world or corporate world, or I think anything that you can kind of deem as centralized, right, is there's an emphasis for more, right? Like, let's raise more money because we need more revenue, we need more headcount, and we need to scale. And that necessarily is not a bad thing, but I think people kind of applied that to DAOs and tokenized communities in the sense of like, oh, we need 100,000 people in our Discord, right? Or we need 200,000 people in our Discord. And this one is counterintuitive, but really what you're trying to do is actually make the DAO feel smaller, right? You don't want to join a Discord where you're one of 8,000 or 80,000 people. That just seems too daunting. You're like, how am I going to make friends when I'm just one of 80,000 or 100,000? But what we try really hard at Krause House to do is trying to understand who the person is that's joining. Like, I'm a graphics designer that is a Knicks fan. And so what happens is we try to build these kind of composable, either like meetings or onboarding cohorts that make people feel like, hey, I'm not one of 10,000. I am one of 50 other Knicks fans, or I am one of 25 other graphic designers, or I'm one of 10 people that went through this draft class, this onboarding program. And so we have a couple self-organizing emergent teams that met each other in Discord and run a 5 or 6 person team going to go do something to help the broader mission. And for all they know, Krause House is 10 people. They don't know any better. And like, I think that's amazing. I'm based in LA, and I don't consider myself one of 9 million. I consider myself, one of X amount of people that live in my apartment building, or one of X number of people that are in my friend group, right? Like, that's how we cognitively think about this as self-organizing humans. And I think we got that a little bit backwards with online communities. It was all about the size of the community, but really what it is it's the quality of interactions that you have as an individual.
No, I think this is great because, all of social media has been, the numbers has been scaling and all about the active users that you can onboard. And so all these, big tech platforms and Web3 has been chasing the numbers, but the quality of connection isn't there. If anything, is actually causing our society to, harm, as some of the studies have shown, right? And so I'm really glad that you bring up this point, that, DAOs are meant to make us feel like we're part of something big, but with a smaller group of people that can make an impact together.
Totally.
Right. And so, I feel like, you definitely did the right thing by interviewing the people and like talking to the humans. And really, did you feel like you had to exercise some new muscles, like with empathy and compassion, being a developer and being on the product side? This kind of forced you to really be a community builder. It almost was like a forcing function, and it was a requirement. And through that, you were able to learn exactly and precisely what the people wanted.
Oh my, yeah. I'm literally probably doing the opposite of what I had normally doing out throughout my entire career, which is, I think I can say this because I am a former engineer, but it's like, it's very siloed. I think it's a lot more creative than people get it credit for. That's probably a different podcast, but I think it's very different. There's much less interaction by design. It's very, even if you are interacting through a paired programming initiative, it's basically maybe you and another developer, right? You're not doing a whole lot of interaction. And then, like you said, I was immediately like whiplashed to the other side where I'm talking to 10 strangers a day across a variety of different things and trying to grow and cultivate that. So I think you used the word like compassion and empathy 100%. That's exactly what those muscles that needed to be flexed. No pun intended. But yeah, I had to get involved. I've had to get involved and like really understand why people wanted to do. And I'm really glad I did, because I was projecting kind of my own vision and goals of what I would have want out of this if I was a new contributor. And that's not what you're supposed to do. You can't do that, in fact, because everyone is coming from, we're humans. We're coming from an infinite amount of variables and parameters to lead us to where we are now. And so they see Krause House, and you're going to get such a wide variety of people and what they think. And honestly, like, this is worth mentioning too. This is where I think is the most special about what we've built in hindsight, which is, I tell any kind of community manager or growth person on a team to find, it's really difficult to set this. It's kind of has something that has to be emergent, right? Just like culture is not something that is dictated, something that's determined over time by a variety of people that have roughly kind of the same value system beliefs. And what I think is really special about Krause House is that nobody in the community has any business being an owner, right? We have no ultra high net worth individuals that are currently here. So individually, there's not a single person in Krause House that could go and get on the cap table of an NBA franchise. But together, we feel like if we work at this, over time and do it together, that this is not only a real shot, but it's probably our only shot, like statistically speaking. So there's this inertia that we have together that's saying like, hey, we're going to go try a bunch of different things, because whether you think that means to go and collect $1 from the 3 billion NBA fans all over the world, or you think that's going more grassroots and picking a team and working with the local community, and it doesn't matter, because neither person's right, but also neither person's wrong. So like, let's all go figure this out and double down on what works. And I think that's what drives us forward. So So that's why I think that empathy and compassion and knowing your community and what they want to solve is pivotal. And to be looking out for that, I don't even know if I have a word for it, but it's that underlying mission that I think everyone wakes up every day and goes to do. And I think that's something that we've been able to tap into and realize, looking back, connecting the dots on that.
That's incredible. Well, you teased earlier in the podcast about 10,000. So does that mean you're doing an NFT drop?
So we have a roughly, I think it's just shy of 10,000. We have that's our kind of our public Discord. We did an NFT drop last November. We had a goal of 200 ETH, but we eventually sold out of our whole supply, which generated about 1,000 ETH for us, which at the time near all-time highs. I know we're kind of in a different market. It was just shy of like 5 million, I think maybe 4.6. I don't know when exactly this is going to be published. We have another one coming up soon for NFT NYC. So that's, any day now. At the time we're recording, we're mid-June. That is coming shortly. Super excited about that. I think obviously 4 million or a couple million will not buy you an NBA team. So I think when we have that opportunity, right, there's going to be something a lot bigger. There's going to be quite a lot of potential people that we're working with to kind of help make that happen. So worth noting that our initial NFT sale was not to purchase an NFT team. I think people who didn't fully read it maybe jump to conclusions there. I think this was to seed our initial treasury so we can go pay contributors to actually move this thing forward in all the ways that we see fit. Because like I said, there's not a playbook for how to do this. So we're gonna have to use both human capital and financial capital to go and figure it out, right? And so that was really what our initial NFT sale was for.
Right. And hey, if crypto goes to the moon, it might be worth a couple million now, but if you're thinking of this as an investment, right? This long-term investment, it could become billions of dollars. It can get you to the point. And you can also continue to do more NFT drops seasonally and continue to grow the community. So there are, like you said, so many paths to the same goal. And as long as the community has the shared goal, everyone will come together and build together. So that's really awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So probably worth also outlining like what we think a valuable proposal is. Like we kind of allow for this. We want to allow for a very emergent roadmap. I think when people always ask like, hey, what's your roadmap? It's like, I think it's just too difficult to say, hey, like here's checkpoint A, B, and C. Like if we were a B2B SaaS company, I think that'd be very easy to do. But for what we're doing, I think is going to require a lot of different work and kind of testing things out. So basically, a proposal has to fall in one of these three buckets, ideally more than one. But one thing we want to do is grow a quality community, not only grow, but retain, right? And so our growth has actually been surprisingly linear, right? Like we didn't have this like really hockey stick moment, but that's actually worked really well for us because we've got to kind of tweak how we do our governance and how we manage treasury and like what does contributor onboarding look like. And like, if we had a really fast, I'll wake up one day with 50,000 users, that would be really difficult to do. So
right.
Anything that kind of grows and retains top talent within the community. I think number two is either on-chain or off-chain revenue. So to your point, it's like, is that investing in things? Is that like investing in different NFTs? Is that building our own products and services that we can license to other people? Things as small as merch, right? Like, can we do a bunch of things collectively to start to grow our treasury where we don't have to constantly rely on crowdfunding? Like, absolutely we can. I mean, we have too many talented people in the community to not figure that stuff out. And we already have some really promising things that we're working on. And then the third is anything that will help prove legitimate to the NBA. Like, is there anything we can do, whether that's sponsorships, working with players? We have a huge philanthropic community in Krause House as well, right? And trying to work with charities like NBA Cares. We're working with a couple different organizations down in New Orleans, renovating basketball courts that haven't been touched up since Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. So like, these are all these things that we would gladly put money behind that to not only serve local communities, but to also show people that, we are humans. We're not just a bunch of basketball fans like in our parents' basement, right? Just on Discord all day. Like, yeah,
Yes.
we're actively trying
Active
to,
participants.
yeah, we're actively trying to improve society and show what we could do to add value to local communities. Because let's face it, NBA team right now are still very much analog. Like you have to be in a city to go to games and participate in some of these things. And so we don't ignore that. In fact, I think we can actually add a lot of value by what I'll call globally planning, but locally activating type thing. And so anyway, those three buckets are what we look for, but like anything that falls in those, if it does all three, fantastic, but it has to do at least one, we will put money behind to go experiment and figure it out.
And how can people join the DAO? How can people follow you and your journey?
Probably easiest way is to go to krausehouse.club. So KRAUSE HOUSE.club. There you can get our link to our Discord. Like, more than happy to come in and check it out. We have a bunch of NBA, banter. We have some DAO and kind of crypto stuff. There's people just dropping alpha left and right. If you're interested in joining, there's some NFTs available on the secondary market. We have some pre-NFT NYC as well that we're getting ready to do. So lots of ways to get involved. If you're interested in contributing, come in and kind of raise your hand. We'll find a spot for you. If you just kind of want to passively check in on us, Twitter is definitely our main mode of communication. We do a lot of announcements there about all these cool things that we have going on, partnerships and things like that. So there's a few different ways to kind of keep tabs on that. Whether you want to kind of do so actively, hop in the Discord and there's a spot. If you kind of want to passively keep tabs on us, I would say join the Discord on kind of the public domain, and also keep track of us on Twitter.
Amazing. And what's your advice to people who are just getting into Web3 or deciding if they should start or join a DAO?
Yeah, so I hear this one a lot, and I think it's for a good reason. I'm not contrarian in this sense. A lot of people are saying, "Hey, dive head first." It's literally the best way. And to kind of something I don't hear that often, right? I think I hear that one a lot, but I think the reason why someone should dive head first in particularly in Web3 versus maybe another industry or another hobby is that, particularly with DAOs and communities, there's so many new, I don't want to call them jobs, but there's new areas or new primitives that just didn't exist in the traditional world. Like, I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, I'm a graphic designer or a copywriter or something like that, but I'm really interested in governance, right? I'm really interested in how you leveraged either tokens or NFTs to decide what to do for the greater good of the community." And I say, that's perfect. Let's plug you in there, right? Like, because we're all trying to figure out this together. How do I know just because you've been a graphic designer for 10 years doesn't mean you won't make the best governance person in the world, right? And so you will find something that may not necessarily be tied to your skills that you currently have, but you'll be really interested in moving forward. Tokenomics didn't exist, right? Anything to do with proposals and governance, like I mentioned, just straight up didn't exist. There's even if you're an engineer, right? Solidity or all these different protocols didn't exist. JavaScript's been around forever, used for a variety of different things. This is a brand new paradigm that we haven't seen. So just jump in. If you end up doing something that you're passionate about, like if you go from copywriting in a startup to copywriting in a DAO, totally fine. Like, we need plenty, but you'd be surprised. You might see something that you didn't even know existed that's really, really valuable, which will kind of increase your value as a contributor, especially if you find something like that where there's not a lot of people working on that. So dive head first, because you will find out so many interesting things that you can get involved in that you probably didn't even know existed in the first place.
Yeah. Well, case in point, for you're now a community builder and a community leader. And
exactly.
You probably didn't even know that was a path for you. And then what you did is dive straight in, start talking to people and realize, hey, I'm actually good at this. I'm actually passionate about this. I actually enjoy doing it.
100%. Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny because it's been a year of working so long and so deep. I didn't even realize I'm an example of that myself, right? I'm doing something completely different. And Again, even with specific community managers, Web3 community looks vastly different than previous community design has ever looked, right? And so
100%.
just dive head first and see, and I guarantee you'll be surprised in a good way.
Well, I would like to close with, what is your personal motto that you live by, or a quote that inspires you?
I don't know if this is a quote or anything. Maybe I'll try to craft it into one. I feel like the biggest growth for myself personally, and any kind of advice I would give to someone, is I've noticed that anytime I've thrown myself into what has been seemingly uncomfortable positions, or something that, kind of piggybacking on what I said earlier, kind of diving in head first on something, is when I've had my biggest kind of jumps forward. I think with what we're doing at Krause House, battling those early stages of like, oh, you guys, this must be a rug pull. You guys are crazy. NBA would never allow it, right? And I'm like, maybe they're right. I don't know. Not the rug pull stuff, but like, will the NBA ever allow it? Like, I'm like, I don't know. Is this something? And then you just kind of keep fighting forward. And now, I don't want to say overnight, but in, a few short months, that whole narrative has been flipped, and every single person I talked to was like, this needs to exist. And so what I would tell anyone doing anything, not just work with DAOs, is that as soon as you kind of start to feel yourself getting a little bit, too comfortable in what you're doing, seek some uncomfortability, because I think that's when you really start to level up. And so anytime, like I said, anytime I look back in my life, and at the time I'm thinking, what am I doing? This is probably the most disastrous thing I could possibly think of. On the other side of that, it ended up being a lot of growth. So I think that's kind of the undertone of why people are maybe so excited about this bear market, or that we're seemingly heading into, is that it's going to be really, really uncomfortable. But if you look back on everything that's been done or developed during these downturns, major growth coming on the other side. And I think the same thing applies to the individual.
Some of the best companies and organizations are birthed during recession times and bear markets. So, it's build time. So
it's build time.
Let's go. Well,
Let's do
so
it.
awesome having you on this podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your life journey about Krause House. And just, what a bold vision. And I'm super excited. I definitely want to be part of it. So
we'll get you in there.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so for any listeners, krausehouse.club, follow them on Twitter and check them out. And we'll be definitely in touch. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. That's some really awesome questions. And I'm hoping that whoever listens, however many people listen, get some value out of it.
Yes, definitely.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us this week on season 1 of The DAO Factor. Follow The DAO Factor on Twitter and YouTube to watch videos of our podcast, where we'll be dropping a new video every week featuring key leaders of DAOs, community builders, and leaders in Web3.